Thanks, Bruce. All right, Alejandro.
Hello. So I actually had another question completely unrelated to foreign policy, I guess.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
yeah, so personally, maybe I'm a little bit of a Scott person in the sense that I am not don't consider myself objectivist, but I consider myself an Ayn Rand fan.
Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Scott person?
I hope I didn't get Alejandro in trouble there. I like that other people can appreciate the objectivist fan distinction. But that was on Yaron Brook's show. They've been talking about the election. We wanted to talk about the election. I thought it was great news. The Ayn Rand Institute's Onkar Ghate, Bayer and Elan Journo discussed the elections right after they happened, and I found some of it quite eye-opening.
Yeah, uh, I watched the whole video, and some of it was very good. I like a lot of Elon's takes, especially. I thought Ben and Onkar displayed their TDS pretty proudly, but I thought Elon had a level-headed take on the election, and um, I, for one, had a very favorable reaction to the election. I, of course, voted for Trump, so I'm very happy that he won. Obviously, Harris was not worthy of the presidency and just a terrible candidate. Onkar said he was depressed after the election. I don't understand that. I mean, if you saw what I saw in Trump versus Harris, you'd be happy that Trump won because Harris would be 10 times worse. So I don't understand Onkar's take in general.
Yeah, and we'll get into that as these clips unfold. Um, Ben Bayer, for his part, starts off truly curious.
This has occasioned a moment of soul searching for many Democrats, trying to reflect on why they lost, what they could have done better. How should they do this? What were their blind spots? What do their blind spots continue to be? Meanwhile, Republicans are running victory laps. Is there really such a reason to celebrate?
It is, yeah, it's clearly a reason to celebrate. But, one of the things Ben says is that, they're wondering what the Democrats could have done better. And if I ever start giving advice to Democrats, please shoot me in the head because that's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah,
The Democrats are like beyond help. So and it's just a waste of breath trying to explain to them what they did wrong and what they could do better.
unless you were rooting for the Democrats the whole time. I mean, how neutral is it to say, what were their blind spots? It's like, how can the Democrats avoid losing next time? I mean, they don't even know who the next GOP nominee will be yet.
Yeah, can you imagine being in the position of thinking about this stuff? Like you're wasting your time thinking about how Democrats could have won, like what they did wrong, and just it's a it's a train wreck over there on the left. And what they, I mean, I don't want to give any advice to them at all. And it's like it's almost I understand the urge to try to help somebody like get better, but come on, man, we're talking about the Democratic Party here. This is not going to get better. It needs to be destroyed. You need
Well,
to just have a hunter killer go after it and just destroy the Democratic Party so that we can reestablish the Republican Party and then form some other party out of the Republican Party. We need,
Libertarian, American Capitalist Party.
yeah, the
Some,
Democrats need to go away.
but they're still in control of the institutions. That's just not going to happen. But the idea that what went wrong, what were the blind spots? I mean, maybe like my issue being the woke religion. Maybe they shouldn't have just let that take over and tried to call everyone racist. I mean, that was a blind spot.
Sure, there's obvious things they should do, and they're gonna give some obvious advice to the Democrats, which that's not a big deal. If you're just giving like the obvious stuff, like don't be woke, don't be a socialist, you know, don't be
Change
racist.
your identity.
Yeah, don't be a racist bastard. That those are just obvious things, but if they're going to get into some nitty-gritty details like policy stuff, and that's just a waste of time. Like, oh, you need a better candidate? Duh. You need someone who's not a puppet, who's not brain dead, who doesn't cackle like a maniac. Duh.
That was a prerequisite.
Yeah, the Democrats can't even get the prerequisites correct.
So in this next clip, Ben asks Onkar if either party deserved to win.
About did either party in this election deserve to actually win?
I don't think so. So I have to say, so we don't comment on elections pre the election, the candidates, who you should vote for. But my view, which I expressed privately, but not representative of ARI, was that Harris was going to be crushed. I could not imagine her winning a presidential election.
Why is it useful to ask if either side deserved to win? I happen to think it's a subtle way to say, in effect, well, Harris is in a way more just because she lost, to end up rationalize judging Trump by a tougher standard. See, he didn't deserve to win, but he did, and now that justifies our hate of him.
Well, this is a weird evasion of what an election is really about. Elections are just who you prefer to win. It's not really who deserves to win. So this question is kind of irrelevant. I mean, yeah, you can sit there all day and debate whether someone deserves an ice cream after the poor behavior that they displayed. But in an election, it's not really, you're qualified, you're either qualified or not qualified. You're eligible or not eligible based on the Constitution. But I mean, what point does it serve? I mean, right, what point does it serve to ask whether they deserved it? It's a way of evading what elections are really about.
Well, I was just going to bring up the point that Onkar builds up the nonprofit stuff, saying that, he really couldn't say Harris would be crushed. I mean, you're still allowed to speculate on who's going to win, but, he's being kind of coy because, I mean, I think we know who he wanted to win. And it's not like they didn't discuss elections before the elections. They just did it in broad terms without explicitly telling you who they supported.
I'd have to look up the specific regulations about nonprofits getting involved in politics, but I think it's just you can't like donate to them or you can't like campaign for them or something like that. But you can have an opinion.
Well, you can't say like a nonprofit organization that's not political, is taking a political position.
Right, but they still have some free speech in this regard. I'm not sure if they can actually endorse a candidate, but they can certainly talk about both sides and like what they hate and what they like about each candidate or something like that.
And they do.
Right, but I think there's some hiding behind this nonprofit status, saying, "Oh, we can't talk about the elections before the elections," and it's a little confusing what he means by that.
He was just saying, I guess, why he didn't announce that he thought Harris was going to be crushed, but it's really kind of a misdirect. Yeah, he thought she would be crushed, but it's not what he was rooting for.
It's also not being very clever. Like there are ways to get your point across without violating some federal regulation. He could say, "Oh, I had a dream that Harris would be crushed," or something. Like he can frame it in a way, that's not going to get him in trouble. And he can like do it through humor, but I don't know. I guess they don't use humor over there at ARI, so. It's a real problem when they're evading what they can do and can't do, and they're kind of like trying to ride the fence there. They're not taking a side. I think really what they're is they're just not taking a side. They don't want, as people, they don't want to vote for Harris or Trump. And so that comes out in their non-discussion beforehand about it.
I see it more as this, how all the newspapers in Atlas Shrugged, they all wanted to be called disinterested. And, they're trying to show that there's not, they just hate both sides equally. But I mean, they are interested, and I do think they prefer one side. In this,
like one more quick point. I think what's at the root of this, like a non-discussion or when they don't take a side, it's their radical sanction issue. Like they just radically, they don't want to sanction any little bit of perceived evil. So if they see Trump as this great evil, they're never going to sanction him at all. They're never going to say, oh, he's better than Harris or anything like that. They can't, because that would be sanctioning him. And so they don't want to be perceived as being in Trump's camp.
No one perceives them that way.
I know, because they go out of their way to just say every negative thing they can about him. They can't make the fine evaluations necessary for choosing a political candidate.
But we talked about, the kind of cowardly middle that don't want to admit that they want to cave to the more dominant force. So they hide behind moral equivalence, but they save their true venom for the right, the side that's already on their heels.
Yeah, no, I don't claim to have cracked their motivation, but it could be a combination of things.
Yeah.
They could be worried about not being taken seriously by the left. Like they want to be able to debate socialism. So
they want to be, they want mainstream acceptance in academia, and the left controls academia.
Yeah, they still think they can change academia or change the left, or change the Democratic Party. This is why they're trying to give them advice. This is why they have this advice role. They think the left is going to listen to them.
Exactly. Well, in this next clip, Onkar starts out as if he's complaining about Harris calling Trump the end of democracy, but it turns out he seems more upset she didn't realize the stakes of the election.
If you're viewing the election or re-election of Trump as the end of democracy, the potential of the U.S. slipping into some kind of authoritarian regime or authoritarian government and mindset, the stakes are high. And the idea of that, okay, I'm running for president and I was vice president under Biden, so I can't say anything critical of anything we did. That, I don't think it's true at any time. But if the stakes are that high, it has to be, and maybe Biden will be really angry and other members of the leadership in the Democratic Party will be angry. But you have to present an actual viewpoint.
Yeah, I think his mind took a turn somewhere. I mean, Trump was such a threat to democracy that Harris needed to admit Biden's mistakes.
He's trying to give this advice to Harris. Look at your mistakes, admit your mistakes, and differentiate yourself from Biden. But he's acting as if he's dealing with a candidate who's not a puppet of the deep state or the deep left or the Democratic Party, like manipulators. Whoever's in control of maybe the corporate bosses or the big money people behind the Democratic Party, they're in charge of Harris.
Like she could just go out and make her own decisions about what strategy to take.
Yeah, so what's interesting is we just found out from I think George Clooney that Obama was pressuring him to say negative things about Biden to get him out of office or to get him to not run. So we found out that Obama is very influential among the big donors and celebrities.
Sure.
And so that's who's controlling the direction of the Democratic Party. And Harris isn't going to contradict any of that. She's not going to go against the money people, the celebrities, the people who put her in power. So what is Onkar doing here? I mean, he's like giving her, like, she's not going to even think about admitting to any mistakes unless the deep state tells her to. And they're not going to do that because they're the ones who are in charge of everything. They're the ones controlling the policies. So
yeah, maybe they should give Obama advice.
But this is what I was saying before. Is like, if you ever catch me giving this sort of advice to the Democrats, just shoot me in the head because I'm a moron. I don't know what's going on with Harris. Biden was a puppet. He was obviously a puppet. He's a corrupt puppet who will do anything for money.
Well,
and Harris, I think, would do anything for power. She's a power luster, but she's dumb. She can't put together, a couple sentences that make sense. She cackles. She has these annoying personality traits, and she just can't defeat Trump. And apparently Trump is Hitler, so she can't defeat Hitler, and that's not saying much for her.
Right. And to that point, just in case the Onkar connection wasn't clear enough, Elan Journo, talks about Harris calling Trump a fascist in the closing days of the election, but it seems like his main complaint is he wanted her to flesh it out more.
By the end of the campaign, it definitely became a talking point for the Harris campaign that the options are her and freedom versus Trump and fascism. He's a fascist. That's where we're heading. And so if you're trying to sell people those are the stakes, as you put it, calling him a fascist, but without actually having positives, without actually saying what you would do differently, without admitting to, here's how we would rectify some of the mistakes we made. Here's a reason to take me seriously. Then it empties the term fascism of all meaning. And it's like, it's similar to what they were doing with her and calling her names, but we can come to that. But there's a danger in an empty slogan applied to your enemy when there are reasons to be worried about authoritarian direction in America. I think that's definitely a worry.
I think Elan makes the point a little better, but it's another one of those obvious points. Like, yeah, you should have a position. You should have a stance. You should explain what you will be doing. This is like obvious stuff. And of course, if you call people names like fascists and you don't back it up, well, that's just poor argument. That's just poor logic. You're not making any sense. You're just,
right. But I mean, the issue is he's not a fascist, but they seem to be implying that she just needed to show his authoritarian tendencies more, as if they're, they see him as a fascist.
I know. Well, if I were giving advice to Elan, I would say, consider the idea that Trump is not a fascist. That's why Harris couldn't. That's why Harris couldn't come up with an argument. Trump is not a fascist. They're just throwing these. The reason why it sounds like her term fascism is empty is because it is. It's because there's no evidence to back it up. Trump is not a fascist.
But these guys are like, oh, she just needed to be more intellectual about it and really spell it out.
Yeah. But I mean, the real advice here is just be a normal person and make normal arguments, back up your statements. Don't just bullshit people, but we get a lot of this from a lot of objectivists, they're making a point and not backing it up, so there's a lot of this going around.
Yeah, but I mean, and we are planning to do a show on tribalism, but I would suggest that, they may hold their own side that they prefer to a slightly lighter standard when it comes to, not using hyperbole. I mean, they didn't like when, Trump called her a communist, but, they're allowed to call him a fascist, or because they basically, agree.
Yeah, there is some like context here. Like if you're talking to a particular audience, they sort of assume that their audience knows the evidence which backs up their general accusation. But that's not always the case, So sometimes you have to assume you're talking to an audience that hasn't heard what you've said before, and maybe doesn't even agree with you. So if you're launching these accusations, then you need to back it up with a little bit of evidence, or at least point in the right direction for people to go and get the evidence.
Yeah, or don't make spurious charges in the first place. But in this next clip, they seem to have bought into the Democrats' talking points that if Trump didn't win, he was going to burn down the country.
This is important and something like favorable for the Democrats and such a condemnation of the Republicans that everybody expected Harris and the Democrats to concede that, yeah, we lost the election. And part of what Harris said, which is true, it's unfathomable that Trump would have conceded if he had lost and it was close like this and so on. And that really is the threat of violence. Because imagine, like Harris said, this is after the fact and after he voted, but imagine somebody voting and thinking, I don't know, I like Harris a little bit more, but if she wins, there's a real possibility of violence, and if Trump wins, there isn't. That's the threat of violence that's influencing an election, and that is what Trump has introduced into, and it's such a corruption of the system, and it's so abysmally evil that I think just that, and this is part of the aftermath of January, you can't vote for Trump.
You can't vote for Trump. Tell us how you really feel, Onkar. I mean, when the Democrats were calling Trump the candidate of chaos, that was their own implied protection racket, as if Trump getting back into power would bring race riots back to the streets.
Yeah, this is a case of TDS, I believe. I think if Onkar actually tried to ground his opinion in reality, he'd have a lot of trouble. He's pointing to January 6th, but January 6th was not Trump's fault. He didn't orchestrate January 6th. He didn't tell people to go into the Capitol building. And also, it wasn't exactly a super violent revolution or something. I mean, what is he talking about? These people just stormed the Capitol because they were prompted to by certain individuals that we won't name on this show. But they went in and caused a ruckus, and there were certainly some violent people in that crowd. But he's trying to go from that to Trump is threatening violence in this election. Like Trump wasn't going to concede. He says it's unfathomable that Trump would have conceded in a close election if he had lost. Well, where does he get that from? That's just
no, I mean, he would have probably contested it because of how all of his internal polls were looking. I mean, he still thinks he won 2020. But it's not. Yeah, he would have done that, but that's not necessarily outside of his legal rights. Is he saying that Al Gore was a dictator as well?
Yeah, well, he's not separating the idea of contesting the election through the courts and the threat of violence. Like, what is this threat of violence? Did he think Trump was gonna like gather a mob and storm the White House or something? What was he gonna? What was Trump gonna do this time?
I heard some suggest that Trump would tell his supporters to burn it all down if he didn't win.
Okay, but what did Trump actually say that leads people to believe this?
I mean, whatever it is that scares these people, that makes them think he's an authoritarian or, the next Hitler or fascist. I mean, they build up in their minds to rationalize their TDS that he really is like that, and he's just gonna, order everyone as if that would work, as if people are just gonna go out and start destroying for destruction's sake. They've just built him up into this fantasy nihilist that's, ready to just self-immolate or the country.
But it sounded like Onkar was saying the simple fact of not conceding is a threat of violence. Like, what? You don't have to, if you think that there's some shenanigans going on and you don't concede and you go through the courts, well, then you're going to have to accept the court's opinion, the court's ruling. And so that's Trump saying, I will obey the law. I'll go through the courts and I'll have to accept the court's ruling. It's not Trump saying, if I don't win, I'm going to hire an army with my billions and I'm going to take over the White House. What is Onkar referring to is my point. It's like, if he starts trying to actually make this an argument and start providing evidence for it, he's going to come up short. There's nothing there.
Well, he ends by saying, you can't vote for Trump. But I was like, why the present tense? I mean, Trump can't even run again. This was done after the election. He was pronouncing his pre-election judgment subtly that people can't vote for Trump. He's disqualified because of how he handled January 6th. Again, I'd hate to hear how he'd sound if he had taken a side.
I think there was more of like a moral statement. It's like, if you believe Trump is threatening violence, then you can't vote for him. But he's obviously knows the election's over. But he's saying before the election happened and you were deciding whether to vote for him and you had this moral opinion, you couldn't vote for him. So,
but he thinks everyone should see it that way. He thinks that's objective truth.
He probably could have framed it a little better, but I think his point was made. It's just, I think it's a ridiculous point.
Yeah. Well, this next clip is used to try to condemn the right for moving left, but it's actually the argument I've made on why I see the left as a bigger threat.
There's a number of ways here in which the right won this election by moving further to the left, and it's because, in important respects, the American public has been moving further to the left, caring less about individual freedom, demanding more centralized state power from a nationalistic perspective, perhaps, rather than an internationalist one, in order to get their policy preferences forced into power.
I mean, can you believe anyone on the right actually has the gall to want to win? When the culture moves left and you use the excuse that the right has moved left as your excuse to vote for the left, I mean, it's pretzel logic. And that's when I say it just, you're usually caving to the more dominant side without admitting it.
Have they?
The right's moved left, so I'm voting for the left.
Have they advocated voting for the left in this election? I think they've moved away from that.
Not explicitly, but when it's only, how many times does Onkar have to say, like, Trump is abysmally evil before you start to think that, gee, he never said that about Kamala. Maybe he preferred her.
Yeah, but even in this discussion, Onkar refers to Harris as a non-entity, or even worse than a non-entity. So I think that's what he wanted. That's what they wanted. They felt like that was at least someone not as evil. Not as evil as Trump. Well, I think they were saying that Harris is not better than Trump. Is that she was probably equally worse or equally bad or worse? Well, I think they have to allude to that or say that. But again, in our tribalism episode, there's like several times where they talk about, or Onkar talks about Trump being disqualified because of how he handled this situation, or because of January 6th, or
even Charlottesville. So, I mean, you disqualify someone so many times. I mean, I remember in 2012, Peikoff was saying that Romney was like a non-entity, but he was still backing it.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what sort of non-entity you are, which is a turn of phrase. I mean, obviously they're not, they're not a nothing, but I think what they mean is that, they're not so significant in the political realm, or they're not doing anything significant. But I wanted to make a point about what Ben was saying about the right moving to the left, because I might disagree with that. I think in some regard, they're probably accepting certain democratic or leftist points or ideas. But in general, if you accept the same policy position, but for different reasons, that doesn't mean you move to the left. It just means maybe that's the right position to take for a different reason. So I think that in some cases, perhaps.
Are you thinking of an example?
Yeah, maybe like like Trump's more anti-war than the neocons, and so, but I think he's anti-war for a different reason, and he's like only anti-war, anti certain wars, like that he thinks are not in America's interest. So I think he has a more he has a policy on war more grounded in pro-Americanism. But if the left is anti-war for totally different reasons, because they think America is like this colonial imperialist power and they kill innocents and all this stuff. So they have a different like reason for being anti-war.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, the mainstream Democrats just aren't anymore. It's all the people like Lindsey Graham and the Cheneys and the neocons like Bill Kristol that have moved left. I think it's fair to say that as the culture moves left, so will the right. Not in every respect, and there will be ways that they lash out and try to move back right. But some of these policies, they're just accepting. It's just things got swayed that way. And it's great that gay marriage is legal now and everyone's accepted it. But I mean, that is just part of the culture moving left. And that is part of why you have to, if you want to kind of balance the ship, it makes logical sense to kind of back the right and make them better.
Well, that's an example, gay marriage is an example of where that's probably just the right, correct position to take, is that you should allow, you may not want to call it marriage, but you should allow civil unions between gay people. And you should accept that they have, all the general rights that just a straight person should have. So that's a case where maybe the right was wrong and now they've become correct. Now they've gone to a better position. And it's not because they moved left. It's because they are more objective now. They're more correct. They're more rational. So this is what I'm saying is you can't just say they're moving left because they've accepted a position that was originally accepted by the left. You have to look at whether this is just the right position to take. It's not moving left. A leftist position would be like socialist. Like
I don't even see conservatism as, it's not as hardcore an ideology as leftism has been the last 100 or so years. And so, for a while it was like these former liberals that came in, like the Irving Kristols that were neocons, that were kind of pro-war Democrats as they left, and maybe that was moving in the right direction. But then it became, Trump and his team that are a lot of former Democrats, even RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. And so, in that sense, I do think it's almost like a new group of disaffected lefties that have come to take the helm of a, right that just was had a vacuum of leadership.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement to the right too. So
yeah,
you got to look at both sides, what's happening there. I think the Democrats right now, if you listen to what's that old timer who has been criticizing the Harris campaign? I forget his name, but he's been he's on the left, and he's been criticizing what Harris was doing, and not being specific on policies and talking about the economy and inflation and everything. And so I think there's movement on the left to fix their broken ship, and they're trying to get out of the woke atmosphere. The stranglehold that the woke and BLM and all that have on the left. So if they can manage that, then maybe there's hope for the Democrats. I still think they're just, worthless socialists in general. But
we'll see what the future holds. It's a long way to 2028.
If they can at least extract themselves from the woke stuff, that would be a start.
Yeah, it would be nice. It's a tall order, but in this next clip, Onkar goes on as to why Trump was unacceptable as a candidate and took over the GOP.
Romney's sort of the last man standing in regard to this, but it's that we can't have this person as a candidate. I don't want A, B, or C, but there would be okay. They would still be representing the Republican Party. Trump is something alien to it, and that's why it's like a takeover. And what you saw, and part of what is so bad about Trump's impact, is he drove out the better people. And then, so now when you look at it and you think, is there much of a difference? No, it's who seems to be in charge of the Republican Party are just Trump loyalists. They're so subservient and obsequious, it's hard to stomach. But that's part of what gives the atmosphere, but because it's a real atmosphere of this is an authoritarian regime. This is what happens in authoritarian regimes, and how everyone kisses the ring.
If he doesn't like kiss the ring authoritarian regimes, he should never want the Democrats to win. These people primary Joe Lieberman of all people. Reagan was able to cut deals with individual Democrats, but they have been in lockstep for a generation. So I'm just curious, do they ever talk about how there's no real Democrat party, that it's all just Obama or Clinton or whichever technocrats controlled Biden and Harris? Does anyone remember Mitt Romney getting Paul Ryan to repudiate Rand right before he got picked as VP in 2012? That's the GOP they want to go back and put in control.
You make a lot of good points. It's like they think the Republican Party before Trump was good. They're saying he drove out the better elements in the Republican Party. No, there were hardly any better elements in the Republican Party. They were able to name like 2 or 3 people. They named like Romney and Ryan. There were like 2 or 3 decent people in the Republican Party before Trump. Now there are several. We've got Elon Musk is joining us, Vivek, several people from the left, the better people from the left are coming to the right now to join Trump. So it's just crazy talk, thinking that Trump is this evil dude who's destroying the Republican Party. Do they even listen to Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand was arguing in her day that Reagan destroyed the Republican Party, that the moral majority was destroying it back then. It's the religious element has been coming into the Republican Party for decades now. It's not because of Trump. It's
from the beginning.
It's just happening, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Trump is helping give these Christians a spine, helping them be more objective, more grounded in values. Because he's not so religious, he's helping to tame the more religious elements, and I think it's going to be a good thing for the Republican Party to have Trump leading them. But then Onkar also talks like Trump's this dictator. He says it's an authoritarian regime. Well, this is just silly. Trump went through the whole primary process. He's had to do all these debates. He's been fighting uphill. He's been trying to make his points and fighting all these crazy deep state type Republicans who are just, trying to toe the line of the establishment. And he's the wrecking ball coming in and knocking things down and then fixing things. So sometimes when the Republican Party is just so corrupt and involved in the establishment, you just got to knock it down a bit and then install better people like he's doing right now.
Yeah. And, speaking of kissing the ring, I mean, why don't you try being like an ARI objectivist that wants to support Trump and see how far you go in the inner circle there?
Yeah, try being Leonard Peacock.
I know they shunted him away for moving right. But you're right.
They talk now like Leonard isn't supporting Trump. Like, so they say Trump is this person you can't vote for. Well, Leonard voted for him. So exactly. How are they going to integrate, the top objectivists voting for someone you can't vote for?
Yeah, that they seem to justify it somehow. But like you said, Onkar said he was depressed after the election, and he says he's upset not so much that Trump won, but that he still got support in 2024, which is, to me, kind of a distinction without a difference. But then he finishes with his and Yaron's made-up standard that we have to be holding our noses to vote for Trump.
So I met people who voted for Trump and so who I think, yeah, this really was a lesser of two evils, but there was considerable support that at most that was a smokescreen to say I'm not supposed to like Trump, so I'll say he's the lesser of two evils. But I found within 10 minutes of conversation, it was, yeah, here's all the things they like about Trump. And I would often point that out. Like, notice you said that he's a lesser of two evil, but it doesn't really seem like you're treating him as evil. You're treating him as he's good, and then you're voting for him because you think he's good. So,
I can't believe his approach. He's like, aha, I caught you. You claim Trump is evil, but yet there are things you like about him, you evader. I mean, we can think he's the lesser of two evils from a pure capitalism standard, and yet still see that one side is so much worse than the other that the better side seems outright good, even while not being the objectivist ideal. He just wants to police how positive people can be about Trump. I mean, when do they ever act like this when it comes to Democrats?
I started with a negative view of Onkar's take here, but he's actually doing us a favor, I think, because he's pointing out to these people that they actually like Trump. So he's talking to people who are confused. Like, I don't know who he's talking to, but these people are confused. They think Trump's evil, so he's the lesser of two evils. And yet they go on and talk about all of his positive qualities. And so Onkar is pointing that out to them, which is that's actually a good advice for them. They should come out as just pro-Trump like I did. I'm pro-Trump. I like Trump. I think he's good. He's generally good. Sure, he's got some faults, but I'm not going to harp on them because I think overall he's good. He's a good person. He's American. He seeks American values and tries to promote American values. Yeah, he's in bed with some of the religious elements, but he's not completely ridiculous on that regard because he's not for the national ban on abortion. So even on abortion, he's come around and he's has a sort of decent take. But I think he's strong on like the energy sector, the economy, and even getting us entangled in foreign wars. He's good on woke. He hates woke. He hates socialism. Even though he's a mixed economist, so he accepts certain regulations that we, as objectivists, we might not like. But overall, I think he's a good person, and I think Trump supporters should come out and just say that.
I agree. I mean, he says in there that people talk about how they're not allowed to say that, Trump is good. It's like, well, there are probably other younger objectivists worrying about what you're going to say about them if they say Trump is good. When you call him, an authoritarian, abysmally evil.
Right. There's a lot of pressure coming from the objectivist elites to be anti-Trump,
right,
and to frame any support of Trump in this negative context, like, oh, he's a dictator, he's an authoritarian type, yet he's pretty good on this issue or that issue. Like, so anytime they want to say something good about him, they have to frame it in this negative context.
Yeah, it's similar to Yaron's claim that I wasn't holding my nose, that I was a full-throated Trump supporter. And that's true. I mean, even though I preferred DeSantis in the primary, I'm so against the whole woke religion, then yes, I was full-throated for Trump, and I don't apologize for it. I mean, as a matter of fact, when Peikoff released his video supporting Trump just before the election, someone asked Yaron if Peikoff was holding his nose.
Your standard has been that people can't be for Trump, that they had to hold their noses. But is it fair to say that Peikoff isn't holding his nose? Peikoff is not holding his nose. No question about that.
Yaron didn't want to say more. In fact, to his credit, he told listeners he wouldn't have them denigrating Peikoff on his show. And there were a few of Yaron's loyalists that were quite ready to do so.
Well, I mean, I agree. Peikoff is not holding his nose. And that's the general theme here, is that you shouldn't hold your nose when you vote for Trump, because he's good. He's a decent person. Yeah, he's had his flaws. He said some things that he probably shouldn't have said. But overall, you get a sense of his character because he goes on all these podcasts like Joe Rogan. He does every interview that he should be doing to get his message to people who are on the fence, or they're independent and they're trying to decide who to vote for. So Trump is actually trying to win. He was trying to win in his campaign, unlike Harris, who seemed to be hiding and relying on bot votes or whatever she was relying on. But Trump is out there. You see him like on full display, his warts and all, and you kind of have to respect him for putting himself out there and being as authentic as possible in front of a huge audience like Joe Rogan. They say Kamala wouldn't go on Rogan because she was scared of people learning about her. So that was the real issue for me in this election, is that the more you learned about Harris, the more you hated her.
Why do you think they waited till late July to put her in?
Yeah, and the more you learned about Trump, the more you loved him. So it's just, Trump has that charisma. He has that authenticity. He will tell you what he's going to be doing, and that was another issue with the Republican Party before Trump, is that they didn't walk the talk. They were they would say stuff during the campaign and then just not do it. Like no new taxes. You heard all these stupid slogans during the campaigns, and then they wouldn't even attempt to do it when they became president. So Trump actually tries to do what he says he'll do. Sure, he gets resistance from the deep state, and they even try to assassinate him. But he tries to do it. And you get the sense that he means what he says, and he will move mountains to try to get it done.
I supported him as well. But speaking of Yaron, after the election, I think he wanted to find kind of a positive spin about the election. So he focused on Trump winning with Hispanic men to prove that he was right in his 2013 debate with Peikoff. Now, I did slightly edit this clip for time, but the context is there.
this was one of Leonard Peikoff, if you remember my debate with Leonard Peikoff from 2013 or 14 or 15, something about that period. His main point, a big part of the point he made about immigration was that if you allowed, massive immigration from south of the border, they would vote Democratic, and that would basically make this an overwhelmingly forever Democratic Party. And I said, that's just not true. Over the years, I've gotten a lot of pushback against that view. That is, no, demography is destiny. And I was ecstatic to see that I was right, because I knew I was right? But I was happy to see that I was right. Basically, no. I mean, Hispanics are just as susceptible to Trump's, call it charms, as Americans are. And the beauty of this last election was that I have been vindicated, and that the Latin population in America has become American.
One of the first things I noticed there was when Yaron said Hispanics are just as susceptible to Trump's charms as Americans, which is an odd thing to say. I hope it was, I hope he didn't really mean it literally, because Hispanics can be Americans. But why is he implying that there's this difference between Hispanics and Americans? Does he mean by Hispanics just the non-American ones?
Yeah, I think he would say that he was just saying that, Hispanic Americans are just as Americans, and that, he was making the opposite point. But I mean, he claimed he didn't want Peikoff criticized on the show, at least until he's ready to find a positive spin on Trump winning. I mean, to me, Trump didn't win Hispanics overall, so it doesn't factually prove his point. And the worst part to me is he's just ignoring, willfully or not, that the Democrats are still trying to use open immigration for monopoly on power, like Peikoff said in the debate. And what, we're just supposed to ignore that or forget about it because it didn't work as well for one election cycle? I mean, they still attempted it. And, maybe it's because he's stuck on rationalism, on principles without context, that he's willing to ignore the attempt because their means of open immigration happens to fit in with like these principles applicable in the full context of a total free market. But I mean, honestly, I think at least part of it is he's getting to go along with the left again, and just be like, see, we're against conservatives on immigration too. Please accept us in academia and among conventional intellectuals.
Well, it could also possibly be that he's such a poor prognosticator or prophet that none of his predictions come true. So he
says they do come true.
So he's harping on this one, which kind of sounds like maybe he's right. So he's going to claim that he was right because he desperately wants to be correct in one of his predictions. And that'll give him credit with his audience. And his audience will think, oh, look, he was correct on this thing. He made a correct prediction. So
Onkar may have been doing something similar when he was like, I knew she was going to get crushed.
Yeah, and that was even a worse example because he kept it private. It would have had more weight if he had done it on a show, a podcast or something, and then he could play the clip and then say, hey, look, I was right.
Exactly. For better or worse, we're on the record.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not into making predictions, but, if I were, I would probably do it on air here so that people could say, hey, look, you were right or you were wrong. Because I believe in making corrections and fixing my mistakes. And that's generally why I don't fly off the cuff with predictions, or don't make wild predictions or speculations, because I don't claim to see the future. I don't think I have some great insight from some, epiphany I've had or some dream or from CNN. I heard something from CNN, so I'm going to repeat it. Oh yeah, Harris has this is a close contest between Harris and Trump. I don't repeat bullshit that I hear.
Yeah.
I try to stick to the facts, and that requires being in the present and relying on what you know from the past. And
I'm more convinced that the dividing line is how susceptible one is to the mainstream media.
yeah, I'm sure he's getting a lot of this, from the mainstream media. I don't know which sources he listens to. I know from personal experience he used to listen to NPR, but I guess he's not listening to them as much anymore. I know Onkar said he listens to Sam Harris, so he gets a lot of his opinions probably from Sam Harris. And
Yeah.
I'm sure Yaron's listening to a lot of news sources to get his daily news program.
Sure, both the Dispatch and the Bulwark. Those are two Never Trump publications, but no, he still likes the New York Times and NPR as well. But here's actually Yaron a week later complaining about how he can't criticize Trump anymore.
I forgot what it was like when Trump was president, and for a period, I guess, before and after, where you couldn't say anything, literally anything, critical of Trump without getting this avalanche, this cascade of he's playing, you just don't get it, TDS, you're jealous of him, you're envious of Trump. What else? 3D chess, 5D chess, 7D chess, all of this stuff, just the mindlessness. I coined it at the time, right? Mindless Trump syndrome. And I'm resurrecting it. He's not even president. Mindless Trump syndrome. I mean, you can't even, like on Twitter, anything I post mildly critical of one of his appointments. Oh my God. It's like, not only that, but they accuse me, of course, of bandying objectivism. Ayn Rand would love Trump. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just mind-boggling, this phenomena.
Why? I don't understand why it should be mind-boggling. I mean, if you obsess over every little problem you have with Trump, then you're going to attract people who defend it or point out your TDS, point out how your criticisms are unfounded. So maybe the problem is that he's obsessing over criticisms that are unfounded in reality.
There is certainly mindlessness when it comes to someone in Trump. When was this magical utopia where no one could criticize Trump? I mean, I remember him being called the Russian asset before he got inaugurated in 2016. He was called racist before that. They created a resistance, even among government employees, to counter him. I mean, yeah, after 8 to 10 years of it, some people got pissed off at hearing constant droning that they never hold the left to. And Mr. Glassjaw can't believe anyone is pushing back on unoriginal TDS griping. I actually appreciate the honesty to acknowledge that some people think he's abandoned objectivism. That could be a whole episode, but I mean, he calls it mild criticism of Trump's cabinet picks. But at some point later in the episode, he actually says it may be the worst cabinet any president has ever assembled.
Well, he has a tendency to make these outlandish, flamboyant generalizations, and then he has to backtrack when he's called out on it. So it shouldn't be surprising to him that people are calling him out on his bullshit. When he says that you can't criticize Trump, I think what he really means is that you can't criticize him without people hounding him about it. So Trump supporters will come out of the woodwork and they'll start criticizing. They'll start, telling him off. Saying like, why are you spouting this nonsense, blah, blah, blah. And he interprets that as, oh, well, I can't talk about it anymore, because he's so dependent on his audience. Like, of course you can talk about it. You're on, it's your show. Talk about whatever the heck you want. It's like, you can talk about these things. It's still America. It's YouTube lets you talk about it on YouTube. So it's not that he can't talk about it. It's that he can't do it without no resistance from his audience. He expects his audience to just be, kowtow to everything he says and just to absorb it and accept what he says at face value, I guess. I mean,
Just never criticize and we'll be fine.
he's not happy with the level of criticism, I guess. He's like, he wants criticism, but on the right things. He wants criticism on what he will accept criticism on. Like,
Which
he won't.
is in reality nothing. I mean, anything that, based on that reaction to criticism, he's just like, for posting on Twitter, it's like, come on, man, welcome to the public square.
And he doesn't realize that when he has these emotional reactions to his audience, that just fuels the trolls. So people who aren't into like real criticism, like me, like I would write essays to him about how he's wrong. And then when he ignores me, but then he inflames the like real trolls who are just calling him names and like making stupid points or whatever. And so then that attracts more trolls. I'm happy to give advice to Yaron. I think that he should stop addressing the stupid comments in his little chat there, and he should start addressing the real criticisms he's been receiving from actual serious objectivists who write essays to him, and maybe he will get more respect that way.
Well, that's probably good advice. But speaking of unhinged takes on Trump cabinet picks, here he is talking about Tulsi Gabbard being too cozy with Assad and Putin.
It's been given to a woman with, well, I don't know. I don't want to insult the intelligence because I don't know how smart she is. But she's kooky, nutty. Tulsi Gabbard. Congresswoman, again, former Congresswoman from Hawaii. A lifelong Democrat, we should add, and a member of the House of Representatives as a Democrat. But somebody who supported Trump. And Trump even considered her for a little while maybe as a VP. So she got a juicy appointment. We're talking about a woman who flew to Syria to meet with Assad during the Syrian civil war. Assad, an enemy of the United States. Assad, a brutal dictator. Assad, a butcher of his own people. Assad, affiliated with Iran. She supported Assad. And she is a huge fan, or at least seems to be, a fan of Vladimir Putin, of Russia, generally on Russia's side. And
so he's complaining that she's a Democrat? I mean, Yaron wanted Harris to win. Just because she met with Assad doesn't mean she's bad. I mean, she was a Democrat congresswoman at the time, seeing what she could do to negotiate. Saying she's on Russia's side is like saying Trump is on Russia's side. Oh, wait, they say that too.
Yeah, well, he calls her kooky and nutty. Is she also mysterious and spooky? He's again with the name calling. It's like, here he tries to actually back it up, I guess, with some accusation that she met with, well, pointing out that she met with Assad. But this is, I think, something he may have gotten from Barry Weiss, who called Tulsi an Assad toady on Joe Rogan's show, and then Joe Rogan called her out on it and said,
I think I remember something about that.
Yeah, Joe Rogan said, how is he a toady? What does toady mean? And she didn't even know what toady meant. She had to like have the producer look it up. So Yaron's getting his information from somewhere, and he's getting his opinions probably from people like Barry Weiss. It's like he's being brainwashed by leftist propaganda. He sounds a lot like a Democrat. He just repeats Democratic talking points.
A lot of it is the Dispatch and the Bulwark. It's never Trumper. That's why he's still like, she's a Democrat, I have to tell you. Yeah, we're against we're so against the Democrats we wanted Trump to win.
Yeah, it's a weird position. But he's also obsessed with differentiating himself from Republicans, maybe he should start obsessing over, differentiating himself from Democrats, because he sounds very much like a Democrat, and he's got a lot of Ayn Rand fans calling him a Objectivist, which a term I don't really care for, but it's, if the shoe fits, he sounds a lot like what's coming out of CNN and MSNBC and all these other Democratic propaganda machines. So that's my advice for Yaron, is step away from the echo chamber on the left and start reevaluating your opinions, trying to ground them in reality.
Absolutely. Well, later in the episode, Yaron is ready to scoff at Vivek and Elon's plan to make government more efficient.
Elon Musk has no standard by which to evaluate which department should stay and which department should go. But that's not even the mandate. It's to make it more efficient. I've talked about this on previous shows. Make what more efficient? Government more efficient? Who wants that? And government doing the things that it shouldn't do, that are unconstitutional, more efficient? None of the recommendations can be passed by presidential decree. If you really want to cut spending, you have to go through Congress. Congress is going to cut spending? Really? I mean, there have been many, many commissions over the last 40 years which have recommended deep cuts or ways in which the government can shrink, stop spending, and stop accumulating debt. How many of them have been successful? Zero. Why? Because Congress is not interested. It doesn't buy them votes. And indeed, the American people aren't interested. The American people don't want government to shrink.
Cynicism alert.
Yeah, why is he talking about the American people as if they don't want government to shrink? They just elected Trump.
His view is that it hasn't been done, so it can't be done. The American people are evil. Humanity's too evil. I mean, honestly, a lot of more people have been made to look foolish by betting against Elon. If there's anyone that can do it, he can.
Right. The evidence that Trump will try to do what he says is there. I mean, he tried to build the wall. He did end a lot of regulations. So there's examples of him walking the talk. And so that's why we have some confidence that Trump will actually try to reduce the government, Trump is talking about cutting entire departments in the government. So I don't know why Yaron is so skeptical here. I mean, some skepticism is healthy, but he's like full on negative, full on anti this. Like, this is not going to happen.
That it can't work. Yeah.
Yaron
finishes the segment letting his audience know that what we see as his cynicism is actually expert analysis.
Just, everybody's excited. Oh, Elon Musk, but then think through. And this is what we do on the Yaron Brook Show. We actually think through these issues.
I don't know if he's thinking through the issues. It's more like he's repeating what Democrats are saying.
Well, the funny thing about that is that may be his position until he does a complete 180 degrees on backing Elon and Vivek's plan a few days later.
Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have an op-ed today in the Wall Street Journal, basically outlining their plan for how to cut government spending in dramatic fashion, and how to cut the government bureaucracy, and what they're going to do. So I thought we'd go over that because it is interesting. It is interesting, kind of the strategy. I now kind of get the strategy. And look, all ill views of the Trump administration aside, I mean, I really, really hope Musk and Ramaswamy are successful. I would love to see the government shrink, however much it can shrink. And if the shrinkage is by eliminating regulators and eliminating regulations, then it's a win-win-win-win-win. I mean, there's no downside to that. There's no losers to that. That is just all good.
In days, he went from it being the worst cabinet in history to win-win-win-win-win. I mean, I'm actually glad that, Yaron sort of wants to try to get on the Trump train, even after it's already started pulling out of the station. But I guess we're just supposed to disregard everything he said on a show the other day about DOGE being a joke. Should he delete that part of his show? I mean, he does like to delete clips sometimes.
Well, I think we should get him a MAGA hat because he sounds like a Trump sycophant to me. Like it's just crazy how much he's talking about how much he likes Trump's plan here. I mean, it's like, is he just in bed with Trump now? It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's funny that he needs to use the disclaimer, all ill views of the Trump administration aside, because he's been maybe reflexively hoping that Trump and his administration failed before he read a positive article on the subject.
Well, I'm happy that he's willing to put his ill views aside. Because that's what he should be doing. He should put his ill views aside because most of them are crap. Most of them are just TDS nonsense. And if he does that and starts over from a position of Trump's great, Trump is God Emperor, Trump is the hero we've all needed and wanted, that would be a good start.
Exactly. Well, Yaron has even implicitly realized that Trump learns from what didn't work the first time and is doing something more permanent this time.
You see, first time around, what Trump did was, it's just that the heads of the departments they in a sense deregulated by fiat. But then the heads of departments could come back, as they did under Biden, and redo all those stuff. But if the courts rules that it's unconstitutional, that is, the very fact that the regulatory agency did this to begin with is unconstitutional, then the new administration that comes after Trump can't put them back in. I mean, if it works, and I'm not sure it will, but if it works, it's really brilliant. I mean, it's not as deep a revolution as I would want, and it's not a thought-out revolution because it won't go through what are the regulations that it makes sense to most get rid of, not from the perspective of cost, but from the perspective of functioning economy. But man, will it shrink the power of the regulatory agencies, the most evil agencies out there, and could be a huge boon for the American economy. So that, I think, is the primary focus of Musk and Ramaswamy.
Again, I'm glad he's getting to the party, even if it's quite late. But he says it's not as deep a revolution that he wanted. I mean, that is some serious nitpicking right there. Since again, before they just wanted the Dems to buy time as they saw it.
Well, what does he mean by deeper revolution? He's using words loosely again because it seems like he wants a dictator. He actually seems to lament the fact that Trump isn't a dictator who can't create this deeper revolution, like who has these checks and balances on him. Like he has to go to the courts to get something permanent in law. So I'm confused. I thought Yaron didn't want a dictator, but he seems to want Trump. He seems to want Trump to do this like authoritarian program.
Well, he would say that it wouldn't be authoritarian; it would be massive freedom. But to Yaron's credit, he does acknowledge that it can't be all cut at once. That there has to be a best order to cutting these things, so that other institutions can replace them. But I mean that the whole the deep cut. I mean that Of course,
Well,
if you're not cutting everything at once, yeah, it's incremental. And so it's just his way of saying, I would have done it better. It wasn't as thought out as well either. It needed to be more idea driven. That's like their complaint against the libertarians.
I just don't think this argument's going to fly anymore. You've got geniuses surrounding Trump now. You've got Vivek and Elon Musk and just incredible people now. It's a sign that Trump has learned something from the previous time he was president. He's looking to seek out even better people, like better leaders of industry, better thinkers, better strategists. I mean, obviously, he had a great campaign and had a lot of people around him telling him great things to do in order to appeal to the general American population. So he's on the right track, and I don't know why Yaron is resisting accepting this. Maybe it won't all happen the way Trump wants it to happen. There's going to be resistance. It's going to be a fight. But I think he's on the right track. He's trying to create this department that will cut regulations and will cut spending and will try to reduce the government. And that's a good thing. And, as far as the government becoming more efficient, I think Yaron's initial reaction to that was negative. And he was kind of saying, like, we don't want government to be more efficient. Well, that depends on what you're making more efficient. If you're making the proper roles of government more efficient, then that's good. If you're cutting spending and waste and all that, but if you're making the environmental agency more efficient, then that's a problem. But I think Trump is on the right track there. I think he wants to eliminate certain departments, including the Department of Education, or maybe that's a Vivek and Elon Musk plan. But I think he generally wants to eliminate things that are bad, and he generally wants to make efficient things that are good.
Sure. Well, just in case you think, Yaron had been converted too much, later in the episode, he's asked if this program was a good enough reason to vote for Harris, to vote against Harris, and goes back to his Trump as authoritarian narrative.
If Gorsuch is great in regulations and Elon and Vivek have a radical plan against regulators, isn't it good Hillary and Kamala didn't win? If that's the only thing you would consider, then yeah, it's good they didn't win. But I don't consider just that. I consider, and I don't know why I have to repeat myself, but I guess some things are just hard for people to absorb. I consider the long-term impact on freedom in America. I consider, and that could involve authoritarianism with less regulations. I consider the long-term impact on the Republican Party and the impact the non-existence of the Republican Party has on our politics. I consider all the other departments of the government, Justice Department, which we just got saved by Gates's horrible behavior, but that was just a fluke. I'm considering the HHS. I'm considering everything, tariffs, deportation. So you might want to focus on a few good things. I don't. I focus on a lot of big things and a lot of varied things. And in the balance, I am anti-Trump. Always have been, always will be.
The pinnacle of objectivity.
Well, it seems like his hatred of Trump has reached epic levels, like religious dogma level.
That's before the inauguration.
Yeah, he just can't admit that something Trump is doing would be better than what Harris would have done. He has to go into this whole diatribe about how he focuses on a million different things. Like, first of all, why is he focusing on all these millions of different things? Just pick like a few essential things, and that's what's important. It's like he's trying to pretend like he's got this sophisticated evaluation of the two candidates, but really he's not making any evaluation. He's just saying he says they're both equally bad. I'm not going to vote for either one. Well, that's not helpful to anybody who wants to vote.
Well, to me, it's like Yaron seems to think that Trump approving Elon and Vivek's plan to deregulate is somehow a smokescreen of putting this on the path to authoritarianism. I
I
mean,
don't get it. That's just weird.
it's either you have to make such convoluted claims or you have to ever finally admit you were backing the wrong side.
How is like trying to reduce government and help people keep more of their money and be freer? How is that a smokescreen? I just don't get it.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the idea that, oh, he's going to be one of those regulation cutting authoritarians. It's like, that's just not how it goes down in the vast majority. That's why they coined the term totalitarian. They tend to take total control if they're
Yeah,
actually an authoritarian.
it doesn't fit with the mentality of an authoritarian. I mean, they're trying to, well, this is the problem. They try to portray Trump as something he's not. So then when they get called on their bullshit, they have to rationalize it. And it just sounds more and more absurd because it doesn't fit
Yeah.
with the reality. You can't make sense of it. It's not even worth repeating anymore because Trump has won. So like why, so they're going to have to find some other thing to do with their time now. And I think maybe we got a little taste of it in the previous discussion with Onkar and Elan and Ben. They were kind of focused a little bit on whether Trump deserved to win. So they're gonna try to spin it now as if, does Trump deserve to be president? That's gonna be the focus. Like, and so that's another perspective they can have that will allow them to just completely focus on the negatives and just
Yeah.
and fuel their TDS syndrome.
So there's also a little clue in there. Trump was saying, he was also voting against his HHS pick or about Matt Gaetz. That wasn't even known before the election. It's like he's making up reasons after the fact.
Yeah.
It's like these people that had TDS saying, oh, January 6th was just over the, beyond the pale for me. It's like you never supported him before that.
Well, this will fit with the does he deserve it narrative.
Yeah.
Now anything he does, which they disagree with, can be an example of how he doesn't deserve to be president.
It's deterministic. It's like Yaron said, always have been, always will be. Don't care about the facts on the ground.
Yeah, that's not very objective.
So, well, that's great. I think we talked about some good stuff, and ultimately, we won!
Yes, victory, Trump train.
Woo, woo, woo! Any final thoughts, William?
Let's see. Well, why don't we just end it by saying Trump is going to be our new president, and that's a very good thing. It's a very good thing. It's a very good thing that Harris is a loser. She should have always been a loser. And I hope we don't have to hear from her ever again.
Well, hey, she's the front runner for 2028, so we'll see what happens. But that's just the early numbers. Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for being here. I'm Scott Schiff, along with William Swig, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.